Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'll be showing you the top 10 most common Ark tames, as in everyone really kind of has these creatures. In at number 10 I'm putting the Baryonyx, and for me this is just such a staple, and I do see a lot of PvE players alike. This is kind of PvE based as well. I'm not going to bother to do a PvP one because I have no idea what that space is like, and you know, I don't really want to get everything mixed up and a little bit wrong, because I really am not a somewhat expert in that field, whereas I would say I'm pretty well versed in the PvE space, as I've been a PvE up player for a while. The Baryonyx is just the king of caving though. There is really little creatures that are actually best in this, and as considering it spawns on the island, it's got such great mobility, it's got that spin attack, section some creatures up to the size of a Megalodon. This really is one of these creatures where it's sort of a must-have, and for that reason everyone kind of does have these things and just agrees that they're really good, and they use them for caving on the island. At least on other maps it may differ, but especially on the island you're going to find a lot of people taming these things. Next up I've decided to put the Theri, the tickle chicken, with its saddle being unlocked at level 69.
Nice.
That's not the reason why it is here though. This is just one of the best berry gatherers in the game. The moss chops is a great one as well, but I find more people are taming Theris than moss chopsers. And obviously these creatures are great for the dragon boss fight too, and you'll find a lot of people using these things for general combat scenarios. That's actually why they're a pretty decent SOTF creature when that was actually around, because I'm pretty sure on ASA, SOTF, that is completely all gone now. It's been replaced with Bob's Tall Tales. Rest in peace. Had high hopes for it, but I guess it wasn't there to last. Or if it's still there, then barely any people are really playing it. But this creature really is one of those where it's like you sort of need one of these things for those resources that it gathers, and it's really great in combat scenarios, and people are generally all very on board with this and are like, yeah, this is a creature which we're going to tame. And a lot of people, because of that, obviously have Therizinosaurus, and hence why they're on the list. I've decided to chuck the Maewing next, as this is one of those creatures where really it is just such a great one for, you know, all things when it comes to speed and mobility, and people do really recognize this. A lot of the popular art channels out there are using Maewings to get around. I know Raj Clark uses tons of these things all the time, and I really am a strong advocate for the Maewing. They are great creatures and they're just so useful. Obviously because they don't spawn on the island, there's a lack of full use with all players, and people say to me, well, what do you mean by accessibility of a creature? You know, you buy the game, sure, you have everything. The DLC creatures are locked behind some sort of paywall unless you spawn them in, and realistically people tend to tame the creatures that actually spawn on the map and don't just spawn them in, especially if you're playing on a server. Cluster servers, obviously you can just go over, but most people, you know, tend to stick to the creatures on said map. Either way, this is still one which a lot of people I think can access because it spawns on Fjorda. They access Portal Feeding Trough, they can gather berries too, pretty great swimmers, and generally just the best mobility tame you can find around. In number 7 I'm putting the Yutyrannus, as, you know, really what is a boss fight without a Yuty at the end of the day? This creature really does come in a huge clutch when it comes to boss fighting scenarios. Like, come on, this is one of those tames where you sort of just need to have one, otherwise you're a little bit weird and eccentric in the grand scheme of things. Conform to what the people are saying with this one, because the Yuty is definitely a tame which I think you all really should be taming without an exception, because obviously you get 25% extra damage and 25% damage reduction with that, with the courage rule that these things have, and that is just such a buff to your creatures. You really just can't say no to that, okay? There is so much going for the Yuty in that department, and it is just such an insane thing to have. Even if you have like the most powerful creatures in a given boss fight scenario, you just might as well. It's like if someone offered you $1 million bucks, and then they were like, right, if you want to, you can have double, you would just take it, okay? You would rather have the 2 million than the 1 million. It's self-explanatory, and I feel the same way with the Yuty. It's just kind of that creature where just you might as well have it, and everyone really does have it. That's why it's very common tame. Next up we've got the Pteranodon, and this is just such a commercial one, really. Like, everyone has got a Pteranodon to an extent, and they are just so widely used in the PvP space and the PvE space, and just generally across absolutely everything, that they really do deserve to be on the list, as I think they are very common. I haven't really encountered any Ark players that have seriously actually played the game for at least a couple of hours, if not way more, that haven't actually tamed themselves up a Pteranodon. It's self-explanatory if you've only been playing the game for 5 minutes and you've never touched it since. But if you actually really get into this game, a Pteranodon will be a tame that you'll be getting at some point, unless you start an Aberration on Gen 1. You can still actually get a Pteranodon on Gen 1, but they won't be useful because you can't ride them, unless you put a little command in the config files. A little strategy for you single player people on Gen 1 that want to use some flyers, you can change that. There'll be a guide somewhere, just look up like how to enable flyers on Genesis Part 1, that will show you everything. I did that actually on my single player worlds because I just felt like it, but then I just realised the Bloodstalker is just the way to go on that map, and it's so much better than Pteranodon anyway. But this is a much more common tame. The only real difficulty when getting one is going to be the Chiton keratin required for that saddle. It can be a little bit of a drag, and some newer players especially can struggle a little bit with getting it, but after all, the actual taming of the thing is pretty simple, which is just a simple bowler and either club it or give it a few tranks. In number 5, I've decided to put the Thyla, as I find this is really one of those creatures where it's like, I think everyone is going to be getting one of these at some point. They're just so useful on a map like the islands. There's so much versatility behind them and all of that. I really feel like you sort of need to have one, and I see a lot of people with these things. Shadow mains are also quite common and popular, but the Thyla is definitely further up there because obviously it spawns on the island, and actually from now on all the creatures do actually spawn on the island. It does make a big difference, okay? Because most people are just playing on the island, really. I know there are loads of other maps out there, but realistically, most people have played Ark on the island map. It is the map that is sort of the most popular. Yeah, Rag obviously has more sort of like players at one time, and a lot of people just playing on that map, but the island overall has definitely had just more players on it, at least from the way that I view it, especially in single player. Maybe for servers it's a little bit different, and I'm sure the Ragnarok servers are more popular than the island servers, but with ASA stuff as well, the island's definitely been quite a popular one because it's been like the only one there until Scorched was just released, and obviously Spartile Slime as well, but you know, you have to pay for that one now, which you didn't have to originally because paid mods. Either way, the Thylacoleo can also deal the bleed ability and climb any kind of wall vertical surface. It makes it a really great travelling mount, but also very powerful carnivore. Sadly, you can't bring it into any boss fights, but that's not strictly necessary. This is just really a great creature for travelling around and decimating anything you really feel like decimating. Continuing on, I've decided to put the Raptor, as I find, come on, a lot of people are going to have Raptors. It's one of those really early tames that you get, obviously, early on in the game, and it's just going to help you out tremendously along the way, and I feel like people are just the type to actually, you know, maybe buckle down and get themselves a Raptor quite early on, because they're really not too difficult. You simply bowl them and either trank or club it, depending on what you want to do. This saddle unlocks before level 20, obviously tranks at level 21, but still, there's not a big gap between that, and a note run can easily net you all the levels to get there in a matter of minutes, really. You'll find no difficulty getting to that level. I'm sure even on official rates, those note runs are going to make that process a much more of a breathe, let's say. And once tamed, you got yourself a really fast, speedy carnivore that is capable of doing quite a significant amount of damage. Their weight and stamina and health may not be what you want, but for your first carnivore, they are definitely going to work for you, and they're going to put in the effort. If you put in the efforts to maybe even tame a somewhat reasonably high level one in the first place, that's definitely going to help you out, and you definitely see the rewards of once you get one, your progress is going to skyrocket. In number 3, I'm putting the Stego, the Parasol, and the Trike. I'm bundling them all together. Obviously, I've only got the B-roll for the Stego here, but I'm talking about all 3 widely because they are just so heavily used as berry gatherers around the map, and people have reasons for using each of them. The Parasol is probably just the first one you're going to get because it is the easiest of the 3 to tame. The Trike is significantly faster than the Stego, so some people really like it for that reason, but I say the Stego is the most preferable one for me because I still have movement speed leveling on my creatures even in ASA, and they just gather so many berries, and if you level up the stamina to quite an extreme, you're really not going to find them the worst in the world, especially with the likes of cryopods and all of that too. You're not going to have the largest difficulty with getting these things about, at least I don't, and for you that may be different, but for me, I don't really struggle with the travelling around these creatures. I don't find that is too much of an issue just because of how many berries they seem to gather and the size of them, and just a huge versatility. For PvP players as well, these are great turret soakers. So is the Carb enemies too, although that's not going to be included on this list because comparatively, not many people are going to be taming the carve enemies compared to something like the Stego. The Stego and the Trike and the Parasol are obviously the more popular tames. In at number 2, we have got the Argentavis, and this is just one of those creatures where it's like everyone really should tame an RG at some point, and everyone sort of does have an RG in a way. Like, it's one of those creatures where if you don't get it again, you're being a bit of an eccentric, unless obviously the map does not support said flyer, Aberration and Gen 1 of course. Whereas all the other maps, as far as I'm concerned, or at least all the other maps that are native to the game, will allow flyers. I'm not sure about modded maps, there'll probably be some others where flyers are again not allowed on the maps. These creatures though are so great at carrying metal, crystal and obsidian with 50% weight reduction on them, and they can carry so much of a wider range of creatures compared to something like the Pteranodon. Although a little bit more effort is involved with taming, they definitely do give that back in the use of this creature. Having a much higher weight and stamina stats with better health and damage too, you really are going to see the benefits in using a creature like this compared to a Pteranodon. Also, on top of that, their saddle acts as portable smithy, which is really nice, especially if you're doing some cave runs and also to get your armor. If you've got some metal on the saddle of this thing, you can just nip over to the next cave while repairing your armor with no issues whatsoever. And they also have a regen buff too, so if you kill something and then you eat said dead creature, you're going to get a nice regen buff, and in a pinch, it really does help out. And in number 1, I've decided to put the Rex, as come on, when have you ever really seen someone not tame a Rex in Ark? It's sort of a goal to every beginner in a way that's just set even before you really start playing the game. It's like, oh yeah, the Rex, you know, of course I'm going to get that at some point. I find it really is one of those where it's like, you actually, like, if you don't get a Rex, again, you're being a little bit eccentric, and if you do get a Rex, then you just follow the rest of the crowd and use these things as boss creatures and generally just carnivores around the map. Although their mobility does lack, that really doesn't matter when it comes to boss fighting. Their health is just so much better than a lot of carnivores that you'll find across the island. They really do deserve to be tamed widely for boss use, and when paired with the Yutyrannus Courage Raw, you're going to get even more as these creatures, and they really are the prime solution for all the maps on the island. While the Megatherium is better for the Broodmother because of that insect rage thing, and the Theri is better for the Dragon because of just how harsh it is to carnivores. As a general rule, the Rex is going to be great for any boss fight you throw it into. The only exceptions really are any kind of Broodmother fight, or any kind of Dragon fight, or any kind of Moda fights, which there is only one of. I'm saying with any kind of Broodmother or Dragon because they do appear in sometimes with combination of other creatures there, and maybe not quite the best for the Manticore, but you can still definitely use it. Obviously don't use it for the Moda, that's pretty self-explanatory though. You know, that thing is literally an underwater boss and all, and Rexes aren't particularly well known for swimming very well. And in a sort of number 0 spot, I've decided to put the Dodo because, after all, isn't this actually just the most common Ark tame of all? We spawn on a map, we punch out a Dodo, and we feed it some berries, and then boom, you've tamed yourself a Dodo. Yes, obviously it can be used for simple kibble as well, and it's quite effective for that. I find, you know, a lot of people are just using this thing as just a first tame, and that's very acceptable, and it's a thing that just happens in Ark, I guess. You load into the game and Dodo happens, and that's probably why I'm trying to put it actually in the top spot, which is, I'm going to call the number 0 spot, because number 1's already happened. And give it up for our patrons, Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Maciejewski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member. And give it up for our patrons, Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Maciejewski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.